There are moments in life when you feel torn between two loves, not two people, but two forces within you. Both claim devotion, both promise wholeness, and both speak in voices so convincing that you cannot tell which one is guiding you toward truth and which one is quietly leading you into illusion. One soul loves you openly. It wants your growth. It pushes you toward responsibility, self-knowledge, and inner order. This love does not flatter you. It challenges you. It asks you to become more than you are. It whispers through discomfort, discipline, and honesty. You feel it when you choose what is difficult but meaningful. The other soul also loves you, but in a far more seductive way. It offers relief instead of growth. It promises safety without transformation, pleasure without consequence, identity without effort. It tells you comforting stories about who you are and why you should not change. It speaks softly, often late at night when your defenses are low. This second soul is not evil. That is what makes it dangerous. It is made of familiar habits, inherited fears, unexamined beliefs, and forgotten wounds. It knows your weaknesses because it was born from them. It learned to protect you once, long ago, when survival mattered more than growth. But protection, when it overstays its welcome, becomes a prison. Most people spend their lives believing they're choosing between the world and themselves. In truth, they are choosing between two inner royalties. One pulls them toward integration, the other pulls them toward comfort disguised as love. One is conscious, forward-moving, and oriented toward meaning. The other lives in the shadows, speaking through impulse, projection, and emotional reflex. When you say, "I don't know why I did that," it was this hidden soul acting. When you repeat the same patterns while promising yourself you won't, it is this soul keeping its hold. Yet it does not ask to be destroyed. Suppression only strengthens it. Ignoring it gives it power. The secret is not to choose one soul and kill the other, but to expose the secret love to awareness. When you turn toward this hidden soul with courage instead of fear, its grip weakens. You begin to see that what felt like love was actually a bargain. Safety in exchange for stagnation, familiar pain instead of unfamiliar growth, predictable suffering instead of meaningful risk. True love, the love that transforms, does not keep you small. It does not lead you asleep. It does not survive on excuses. It asks you to look at yourself without distortion and to take responsibility for what you see. The moment you recognize the secret, the inner conflict changes. You stop asking which path feels easier and begin asking which path makes me more whole. And wholeness is never comfortable at first. It demands that the light descend into the places you have avoided. When the two souls meet consciously, something extraordinary happens. The hidden soul no longer sabotages you. It becomes integrated. Its energy turns from resistance into strength. What once held you back now fuels your depth, empathy, and resilience. This is the real union, not the victory of one soul over the other, but the awakening of awareness that places you finally in the center of your own life. Two inner forces shape your life, even when you believe you are making choices freely. One force moves quietly but persistently toward growth, meaning, and expansion. It urges you to face discomfort, to ask difficult questions, and to step beyond the familiar boundaries of who you have always been. This force does not shout. It does not seduce. It speaks through unease, through the feeling that something in your life is incomplete, unfinished, or false. When you ignore it, you feel restless. When you listen to it, you feel afraid, but alive. It is the inner movement that pulls you toward becoming more conscious of yourself and your actions. Opposing it is another force, just as powerful, often stronger in the moment. This force seeks stability, safety, and emotional preservation. It wants things to remain as they are, not because they are perfect, but because they are familiar. It learned its language early in your life. when avoiding pain mattered more than discovering truth. It whispers reasons instead of commands. It tells you why now is not the right time, why change would be risky, why your situation is understandable and justified. This force does not oppose growth openly, it delays it indefinitely. Most people assume this second force is simply laziness or weakness. In reality, it is deeply intelligent. It remembers every disappointment, every rejection, every failure you have experienced. It arranges your habits, your beliefs, and even your self-image around the central goal of emotional survival. It teaches you who you are allowed to be, and more importantly, who you must never become. When you feel sudden resistance to an opportunity, an urge to retreat just as something meaningful approaches, it is this force stepping in to maintain equilibrium. These two forces do not operate one after the other, they work simultaneously. When you consider a decision, they both speak. Growth presents itself as possibility mixed with uncertainty. Preservation presents itself as comfort mixed with fear. The mind often mistakes familiarity for truth and safety for wisdom. As a result, people repeatedly choose what feels stable over what feels meaningful, and then wonder why life slowly loses depth and vitality. The conflict between these forces does not appear dramatically. It shows itself in small compromises, postponed conversations, unrealized talents, and patterns repeated despite promises to change. Over time, the force of preservation builds a convincing narrative around your identity. It tells you this is simply who you are, that your limitations are fixed, that your longings are unrealistic. Meanwhile, the force of growth continues to signal through dissatisfaction, anxiety, and an unshakable sense that something essential is being neglected. What makes this inner struggle so powerful is that both forces believe they are protecting you. One protects your future, the other protects your past. One pushes you toward integration and expansion, the other anchors you to establish patterns. Until you become aware of this tension, you will experience your life as a series of external problems rather than an internal dialogue. Awareness does not immediately resolve the struggle, but it changes its nature. When you recognize these forces within you, you stop being unconsciously driven by them and begin to stand between them, capable of choosing not what feels safest in the moment, but what leads to a deeper, more conscious existence. The dangerous soul does not feel hostile, and that is why it is rarely questioned. It does not arrive with violence or threat, but with familiarity and reassurance. It speaks in a voice that sounds like your own, using your memories, emotions, and past experiences as evidence for why you should remain exactly where you are. This soul feels protective. It offers comfort when you are overwhelmed and explanations when you are afraid. Because it reduces inattention, you mistake its presence for wisdom or self-care, never realizing that its true power lies in how gently it persuades you to stop growing. This soul formed at a time when protection was necessary. It emerged when uncertainty felt dangerous and emotional pain seemed unbearable. Its original purpose was to shield you from chaos, rejection, and failure. Over time, however, it learned to equate safety with repetition. Anything unfamiliar became a threat. Anything that challenged your established identity was labeled risky, irresponsible, or unrealistic. Instead of guiding you forward, it learned to circle the same emotional ground, reinforcing habits and beliefs that once helped you survive but now quietly limit your life. Because this soul does not attack you, you rarely defend yourself against it. It never says, do not grow. It says, wait. It never says you cannot change. It says, this is just how you are. Its language is reasonable, compassionate, and often convincing. When you hesitate before an important step, when you rationalize avoidance as patience or caution, this soul is at work. It wraps fear in logic and stagnation in understanding. The danger is not in what it forbids, but in what it delays indefinitely. This soul also feeds on emotional rewards. It offers relief from anxiety by encouraging distraction. It dulls discomfort with familiarity. It strengthens your attachment to roles you've already mastered because competence feels safer than vulnerability. Each time you retreat into what you know, it grows stronger. Each time you choose comfort over confrontation, it confirms its belief that growth is unnecessary and dangerous. Slowly, without drama, it becomes the unseen architect of your choices. The most deceptive quality of this soul is that it feels loving. It reminds you of your wounds and urges you to be gentle with yourself, but it quietly uses those wounds as reasons to remain unchanged. It convinces you that protecting yourself from pain is the same as respecting yourself. In doing so, it transforms self-compassion into self-limitation. You begin to organize your life around avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing meaning. And yet you cannot explain why a sense of emptiness follows you. What makes this soul truly dangerous is that it hides in plain sight. It becomes part of your identity, shaping your preferences, your expectations, and even your moral judgments. You begin to defend it without realizing it, interpreting any challenge as an attack. When others point out patterns in your life, you feel misunderstood rather than curious. The soul's influence is strongest when it remains unconscious, because unexamined protection eventually becomes control. Awareness does not destroy this soul, nor should it. It dissolves its absolute authority. When you begin to observe its voice rather than obey it, its power weakens. You start to see that what feels like care is often fear in disguise, and what feels like safety may be a subtle form of self-betrayal. In recognizing this, you reclaim the ability to choose growth without rejecting compassion, and protection without surrendering your potential. The shocking secret is not that you are being loved, but that the love you are receiving is not always what it seems. One of the souls that surrounds you, that claims devotion and protection, does not actually want what is best for your growth. Its affection is conditional, tethered to your willingness to remain the same. This soul thrives on familiarity, repetition, and the patterns that keep you predictable. It does not demand overt obedience, nor does it shout in anger. Instead, it quietly measures your choices, rewarding compliance with comfort and punishing curiosity with unease. The secret lies in its subtlety. It does not appear hostile, yet its love is restrictive, binding you to a version of yourself that no longer serves your higher purpose. This soul has learned to disguise its intentions in the guise of care. It reminds you of who you have been, not who you could become. It knows your vulnerabilities, your fears, and your insecurities, and it uses them as tools to shape your decisions. Each time you find yourself avoiding risk or retreating from challenge, it is present, whispering rationalizations, encouraging procrastination, and offering consolation in place of transformation. Its love is a bargain, safety in exchange for stagnation, familiarity in exchange for authenticity. And because it feels comforting, you rarely question it, failing to notice that what you accept as devotion is often a tether to your past self. The shocking part is that this soul is not evil, and it does not intend harm. Its mission was once protective, born from necessity when fear and insecurity dominated your life. It acted to shield you from pain and chaos, and for a time it succeeded. But protection that continues beyond its purpose becomes a form of control. Over the years, it shifts from guardian to jailer, presenting limits as boundaries, rules as wisdom, and inertia as stability. It does not confront you openly, it seduces you gently, luring you into repeated patterns that feel safe, yet hollow. The most dangerous element of this secret is that you trust it, even as it confines you, believing that its restraint is care. Recognizing the hidden motives of this soul requires courage. You must observe its voice without judgment, noting the times when it favors comfort over growth, repetition over exploration, and fear over curiosity. Only by seeing its patterns can you understand that what feels like love may be a subtle form of self-sabotage. The shocking secret is not a dramatic betrayal. It is an ordinary, everyday phenomenon. The love that does not liberate, the affection that does not transform, and the loyalty that does not encourage you to become your fullest self. Understanding the secret changes everything. It teaches that love, even when sincere, is not inherently beneficial. Some love protects growth, while other love protects stagnation. The soul that appears devoted may secretly keep you small, rewarding what is familiar and punishing what is essential. The shock is not in discovering that this love exists. It is in realizing how long you have mistaken safety for care, repetition for devotion, and familiarity for alignment with your true path. This is the secret that transforms your perception, that one of the loves in your life is devoted not to your potential, but to your attachment to what you refuse to change. Suppression strengthens inner conflict in ways that are often invisible at first, yet devastating over time. When you try to push away feelings, thoughts, or impulses that feel uncomfortable or unacceptable, you are not eliminating them. You are storing them, giving them power in the shadows where you cannot see them. The mind does not function like a simple eraser. It functions like a river. When you attempt to dam a current, the water does not vanish. It builds pressure, finding new channels, eroding structures you never intended to break. Suppressed thoughts and emotions behave the same way. They do not disappear. They mutate, intensify, and return in forms that are harder to recognize and control. Every act of suppression signals to the unconscious that the content being ignored is dangerous or forbidden. This creates tension between the conscious self, which believes it is in control, and the unconscious, which continues to harbor the rejected material. The result is inner conflict, a silent struggle between what you want to acknowledge and what you are unwilling to face. The more you resist, the more energy the unconscious invests in preserving that which you deny. A thought or feeling that is avoided consciously may emerge later in dream, impulse, or habit, often magnified beyond its original scale. In this way, suppression functions less like protection and more like a pressure cooker, building internal force that will eventually demand release. Suppression also distorts perception. When parts of yourself are ignored, you begin to see the world and yourself through an incomplete lens. Your reactions become unpredictable because they are influenced by unseen motivations that have been denied expression. You may feel sudden anger, inexplicable anxiety, or irrational resistance to situations that, on the surface, appear harmless. These reactions are the surfacing of suppressed material, pushing against the conscious mind in a desperate attempt to be acknowledged. The conflict grows because you are often unaware of the connection between your inner suppression and your external behavior, creating cycles of confusion and frustration. Moreover, suppression undermines integration. Growth requires the conscious acknowledgement of all aspects of yourself, even those that seem negative, shameful, or inconvenient. When parts of the self are hidden away, the personality fragments. One part of you pushes forward toward goals, ideals, or ethical standards, while another lurks in shadow, driven by unresolved impulses and unmet needs. The result is a perpetual tug of war, where inner energy is wasted on tension rather than constructive action. Emotional and psychological life becomes a battlefield because unresolved internal forces manifest as doubt, indecision, and self-sabotage. The irony of suppression is that it often begins as an attempt at control. You may believe that by denying uncomfortable emotions or unwanted thoughts, you are strengthening yourself, maintaining composure, or avoiding pain. In reality, suppression guarantees the opposite. It amplifies the very conflicts you seek to eliminate. The energy used to push away internal material strengthens its intensity, creating a feedback loop where avoidance feeds resistance, and resistance feeds avoidance. True resolution comes not through denial, but through conscious engagement. Observing, naming, and understanding the suppressed material does not weaken the self, it strengthens it. Awareness diminishes the power of hidden forces, allowing them to be integrated rather than battled. When you allow suppressed thoughts and emotions to be seen, you reduce internal tension and transform conflict into clarity. What once felt like chaos becomes intelligible, and the energy wasted on repression is redirected toward growth, understanding, and intentional action. Suppression, in essence, does not protect, it enslaves. Only acknowledgement liberates. True transformation requires responsibility in ways that many overlook, because transformation is often imagined as a sudden event, a magical shift in circumstances or identity. In reality, transformation is a deliberate, conscious process that demands ownership of every aspect of your life, your choices, your emotions, your patterns, and the consequences that flow from them. It is not enough to desire change or to dream of a better self. The work of transformation begins where accountability meets action. Without responsibility, growth remains superficial, and the potential for real change is lost in wishful thinking. Responsibility in transformation begins with self-honesty. It requires the courage to look unflinchingly at your habits, your limitations, and the decisions that have led you to this moment. You cannot transform what you refuse to see. Every avoidance, every rationalization, every justification for staying the same is a barrier to authentic change. The act of acknowledging your role in your own life is not blame, it is clarity. When you recognize the ways you have contributed to your struggles, you reclaim power. Transformation cannot be imposed from outside. It can only arise from the conscious acceptance of your own influence over your life. Responsibility also extends to your emotional and psychological landscape. True change demands that you confront your fears, your insecurities, and the hidden impulses that shape your behavior. It is easy to attribute setbacks to external forces, or to imagine that transformation is something someone else will provide for you. But growth cannot occur through escape or denial. By taking responsibility for your internal world, by observing thoughts and feelings without judgment, and by choosing how to respond, you become the architect of your own evolution. Emotional maturity and self-mastery are inseparable from this active participation in your own life. Another dimension of responsibility lies in your actions and choices. Transformation is not merely internal, it manifests outwardly in behavior, relationships, and engagement with the world. Every decision, no matter how small, contributes to the formation of a new identity. True transformation requires that you examine your patterns of behavior and take ownership of change, rather than waiting for circumstances or other people to do it for you. It asks that you act with intentionality, aligning daily choices with the vision of the person you wish to become. Without consistent responsibility in action, inner insights remain inert and potential remains unrealized. Responsibility also involves patience and perseverance. Transformation is rarely linear or immediate. Setbacks, resistance, and discomfort are inevitable, and it is through these challenges that responsibility is exercised. Each moment of failure is an invitation to reassess, to correct, and to recommit. Avoiding responsibility during these trials leads to repetition of old patterns. Embracing it turns obstacles into teachers. The willingness to endure discomfort, to confront error without deflection, and to remain accountable to yourself is what converts insight into enduring change. Finally, true transformation requires the recognition that responsibility is freedom, not burden. By claiming ownership of your life, you free yourself from the illusion that others or circumstances control your destiny. Growth becomes a product of deliberate choice, a conscious unfolding of potential rather than passive circumstance. Transformation, therefore, is inseparable from responsibility. It is both the cost and the reward, the requirement and the path. Only through responsibility does change become authentic, enduring, and liberating. Integration brings wholeness by uniting the fragmented parts of the self that have long operated in isolation or conflict. Every individual carries aspects of themselves that are hidden, suppressed, or rejected. Traits deemed unacceptable, impulses considered dangerous, emotions judged inappropriate, and memories or experiences that feel shameful or painful. These parts do not vanish when ignored. Instead, they remain active in the shadows, influencing behavior, shaping perceptions, and subtly sabotaging conscious intentions. Wholeness arises not from erasing these elements, but from acknowledging, understanding, and bringing them into conscious awareness so that the self becomes complete rather than divided. The process of integration begins with recognition. To integrate is to see what has been unseen, to notice what has been denied, and to accept what has been resisted. Every hidden impulse or neglected emotion carries information about needs, boundaries, desires, fears, and unresolved conflicts. By observing these aspects without judgment, you transform them from hidden forces into conscious components of your personality. This is not passive acceptance, it is an active engagement with the totality of your inner life. The parts that once felt alien or threatening become familiar and intelligible, and in their recognition, the inner tension that once divided the psyche begins to dissolve. Integration also involves reconciliation. Parts of the self that appear contradictory or incompatible are not enemies, they are expressions of a complex system striving for balance. One part may demand freedom while another seeks safety. One part craves intimacy while another retreats into solitude. One part yearns for achievement while another clings to comfort. Without integration, these conflicts produce confusion, frustration, and emotional turbulence. With integration, they are acknowledged as facets of the same whole, each contributing insight, energy, and perspective. The reconciliation of these internal opposites creates a sense of harmony that is not static, but dynamic, allowing for flexibility, resilience, and depth of experience. Wholeness through integration also transforms relationships with others. When internal conflicts are projected outward, misunderstandings, blame, and repetitive patterns dominate interactions. By integrating the shadowed or neglected aspects of yourself, you reduce projection and cultivate authenticity. You respond rather than react, perceive clearly rather than distort, and engage with empathy rather than fear. Integration teaches that what you reject within yourself often appears in others. And by embracing your own complexity, you develop tolerance and understanding, deepening connections, and fostering meaningful interaction. Furthermore, integration nurtures creativity, insight, and growth. The energy previously expended on hiding, resisting, or denying aspects of the self is liberated and redirected toward conscious creation and exploration. You begin to access parts of your mind and emotion that were dormant, unlocking intuition, imagination, and resilience. Wholeness is not uniformity or perfection, it is the capacity to move fluidly through life, drawing on the totality of your experience, intelligence, and feeling. Ultimately, integration brings wholeness because it is the conscious acknowledgement of reality as it is, both within and without. It allows you to inhabit your own life fully without fragmentation or avoidance. Every embraced shadow, every reconciled contradiction, and every acknowledged impulse strengthens your presence and authenticity. In this way, wholeness is not an abstract ideal, it is a lived experience, the profound result of uniting all the parts of yourself into a coherent, conscious, and resilient whole. And so when you stand between the two souls that love you, remember this. One pulls you toward comfort, the other toward truth, but both are part of you. The shocking secret is not a trap, it is a teacher. The hidden soul you once feared is not your enemy, it is a piece of yourself waiting to be seen, understood, and integrated. Suppression only strengthens its hold, but awareness dissolves its power. Responsibility is the bridge that carries you from illusion to authenticity, and integration is the path that turns conflict into wholeness. Embrace both. Observe without judgment. Choose with courage. When you do not destroy one soul to favor the other. You awaken both, allowing them to serve your growth rather than your fear. You become whole. You become conscious. You step into the center of your own life, no longer divided, no longer hiding, fully alive, fully present, and unshakably free.